I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Today on Pro Mindset Podcast, we have a special draft guest, Ric Serritella. Ric is the president and founder of NFL Draft Bible. The NFL Draft Bible is a resource. It's a scouting service, and his audience is, NFL teams, NFL agents, and those types. And Ric, I want to thank you for being on the show today. And why don't you share with the audience when and how you got started?
2002, I started the NFL Draft Bible. I thought there was a void there in the market when Joe Bucksbaum died from Pro Football Weekly, and it took a while to grow that business out. I worked in the TV industry for quite a while and did a lot of great things there, and then walked away from my job at Wall Street Journal where, I was making six digits, Craig, and I do what I love, and I walked away from a corporation, New York City, Manhattan job in order to pursue my passion, because the NFL draft is what runs through my veins. NFL GMs, scouts, NFL trainers, colleges, all-star games, it all, pro day workouts, agents, it all runs through my veins. Anybody who is somebody in the NFL draft industry knows who the NFL Draft Bible is. It took us, about 2 decades to get there, and now we have an NFL Draft publication that, we stopped producing the book in 2010 because of, the way that the publishing costs just kind of skyrocketed and everything evolved online, especially during that, circa 2007. By 2010, nobody was buying books, so we kind of stopped producing books and manufacturing that. And then I think, as everybody else died by the wayside, Pro Football Weekly, Mel Kiper, and the list goes on and on. Lindy's and Athlon, I think, still produce a magazine, but, they kind of publish those in January. By the time you get it in March, it's kind of outdated information. So we brought back the book last year. We did it again this year, and I can tell you that, 622 scouting reports, only 250 guys are going to get drafted. It's the most scouting reports we've ever produced. I'm proud of the hard work that our team put in. It's funny to talk to some of the scouts around the league and say, hey, you guys are more prepared and have more in-depth information than what our scouting department has, and the owners are asking us, wait, why don't we have what the NFL Draft Bible has? So that's an honor and a privilege, and just happy to still be doing this, and it's just what I do and what I love, and helping out others is a big part of it too. And throughout the years, we've helped so many players, hundreds if not thousands of guys, help achieve their dreams of getting on to the next level.
To put together 620 plus reports in preparation for an NFL draft, you guys didn't start like last week. So kind of walk us through, a fiscal year of your business. Do you guys start watching seniors to be and likely to come out juniors during the summer? And then obviously go to the All-Star Game, Combine, and all those things.
Sure. So, for example, right now, I think the process for next year starts really about the Combine. So by the time we go to the Combine, let's use this year, for example, all those scouting reports are done in the can. It's just a matter of getting those measurables. So this year, we got done a little bit earlier just because pro days were canceled, and those were numbers that we didn't have to include in the book. So we were ahead of the schedule in terms of getting the book published this year. But I would say, the 2021 process essentially kicked off during Combine Week, where we're turning the page and identifying the top seniors for next year. And we've got a database right now of about 6,000 players that, we'll try to narrow down to 600 for next year's draft cycle. But, I've been talking to all the pro liaisons, all the coaches from across the country, FBS, FCS. I think, the unique dynamic this year is because the junior pro days and pro days were canceled, that, you won't have a Blesto or a national report, which, nearly, I think at least 22 of the 32 NFL teams belong to one or the other. So what we've done at NFL Draft Bible is kind of gone out in front, communicated with the NFL teams, communicated with the colleges, let them know, like, hey, because of the pandemic this year and because there will be no Blesto or national scouting reports, hey, we want to identify those top seniors. We want to talk to the strength and conditioning coaches and get verified measurables. And that process has already begun. I mean, while the mainstream media catches up to this year's draft in March and April, we're kind of turning the page, looking ahead to 2021. And in terms of the scouting process, I think the one thing that's unique and different about what we do is we're out there in the field. So, for example, no disrespect to Mel Kiper or, Charles Davis and Dane Brugler or whoever the top draft nicks out there are. There's just nobody scouring the country on location across the nation like we are. I don't see those guys. I don't see Mel Kiper on the scouting trails. I don't see those guys up in the schools where, I personally went to 25 games. So that's 50 teams that I saw play live in game action, and then I visited another 25 to 30 schools. Between the games and the schools I visited, I saw about 80 teams up close, live and in person. I talked to the coaches. I talked to the janitors. I talked to the cafeteria workers. I talked to students on campus. I did tailgating in the parking lots before the game with their family. I can tell you that nobody is getting to know these players better than we do in terms of what they're like, not only on the field, but more importantly off the field, because I think when you get to the next level, the reason why players bust is not because of talent, it's because of what's between the ears, what's in your heart. And the more you can get to know a player, the more you can get to know a person and their family, well, then the more you can reduce the risk factor and reduce those chances of busting on a player selection.
Well, two things that come to mind, Rick, is one, is it a business opportunity for your group and your organization when there may or may not be a national Blesto this year?
Yeah, again, I think there's a huge opportunity not only with the NFL teams that want to subscribe to our services, but also the NFL agents who now use that as a backbone. And while that information is supposed to be private and secure, we all know that it does leak out to the industry and the scouting community, and teams and agents won't have that information to lean on. So absolutely, it's just another angle for NFL Draft Bible to kind of position themselves as the go-to industry leader. I would say that, and then with the pandemic, unfortunately or fortunately, it's been the biggest, I would say the weirdest dynamic for me, because it's been business as usual. The draft must go on. So it's been balls to the wall crazy for me, but because of the pandemic and all the agents hitting me up and trying to help them out without the pro days, it's been the craziest, most unusual, unorthodox draft. I can't wait 5, 10, whatever, how many years we are until somebody makes a movie about this.
That's a good point, because it has been a little bit surreal. I've talked to some GMs and head coaches, and, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm sitting on my patio in the backyard. And, there's such a disconnection within the organizations that there normally isn't. And there's not as much groupthink, not as much, we time. It's more me time, individual stuff. And yes, they're doing Zoom, they're communicating, but it's not the same as usual. The draft could show some different results because of that. Could be better, could be worse.
We won't see too much impact, I think, on day 1 or day 2. I think where you'll see it is day 3, where, teams are going to have to rely on their regional scouts more and trust those guys. And we're going to find out which organizations have boots on the ground, not only boots on the ground, but boots on the ground they can trust, because I think you're going to see guys that could get taken in the 4th round that, other teams had as an undrafted free agent. And to your point, the groupthink type of thing. And one thing I learned from this year's scouting process more than anything else is that, not only was the pro day a beneficial factor for evaluators, but also gathering intel and information. And if you notice, there's probably a little bit less and a little bit less rumors than previous years, because those pro days is where the beat reporters can gather information. They can talk to coaches, they can talk to scouts, they can talk to GMs, and kind of get a better feel for which players are moving up and moving down and all that. So the information flow and the information process has kind of been cut off because, here we are beginning of March or right before the middle of March, all these pro days were shut down. So essentially for the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've been doing business as usual from our homes. And, teams just aren't as accessible when you're reaching out to them, via cell phone, text message, or email, as opposed to being at that pro day, being able to interact with them, go up to them in person and get instant feedback and analysis. So I think it's going to be a really intriguing dynamic, and day 3 is going to be, I think even, day 1, the mock drafts, more so this year, more than any other year, are going to be so far off the mark that there's going to be a lot of surprises, a lot of interesting players coming off the board that we had no idea. I will say on the opposite end of the spectrum where, we saw a lot of trading in the first round in recent years, I think it'll be harder to accomplish that just because, when the bullets are flying, you're in that war room, and now we're virtuoso style. Usually you have your director of personnel, your captologist, somebody fielding phone calls, taking trade offers. But if you're trying to move a pick and you got 3 or 4 teams interested and you're trying to do that virtuoso style, it becomes a little bit more difficult with the clock. You're on the clock, and the NFL announced that this year, the first year ever, clock expires, they will halt the draft. They will pause the draft. There will be no Minnesota Vikings fiasco that we saw back in the day. The NFL will actually halt the draft and make sure there's no technical glitches. A lot of new dynamics and things. Like I've told all the agents and players and scouts, expect the unexpected, right?
No doubt about it. And I would say the other thing, Rick, is that on day 3 especially, when you've got a GM in his house, a head coach in his house, everybody's in different places. And yes, they might have multiple Zooms going on. I saw where John Lynch has like 5 computers. Well, he's got those for a reason. It's for communication and information. A lot of times when you talk to scouts, and you might talk to a scout in a certain area about a certain group of players the entire year. And then it comes up to the draft, and they draft somebody that you didn't expect them to draft. And so you talk to the scout and say, hey, what was it thinking there? He said, I don't know. They kicked us out of the room. And the scouts get an opportunity to write the reports, say their piece, stand on a table for the guys they really love. But then they really don't have a say during the draft when it's live. That's in a normal year. So I would guess that this year it's even going to be less. And so even though those GMs and coaches have to trust their scouts, the boots on the ground, so to speak, because of the lack of pro days and some of the stuff, I also think it gives the decision makers, and every team has different ones, more autonomy than ever.
Yeah, I think the GMs are going to harness a little bit more of that load. What I'll tell you is this, unfortunately, I'm a big small school advocate, have been for many years, and, there is about 13 FCS guys drafted last year. Without verified measurables, it's going to be hard to pound the table or state a case or really get a bat to a small school guy without those measurables. And if you're not invited to the combine, typically you see about 30 non-combine invites drafted every season. I think this year will be lower too because we don't have those per day, so I could see 15 to 20 guys, maybe non-combine invites. But, I think we're even the combine was, I'll use cornerbacks, for example. There were 30 corners invited to the combine. Only 10 of those guys participated in all the drills. The other 20 basically just said, hey, I'm going to run my 40-yard dash. Come see me at pro day. And, James Franklin from Penn State is notorious for telling his players, you go to the combine, you run the 40, you do everything else at Penn State, home track, home field advantage, faster track, you do your short shuttle, your 3-cone at Penn State pro day, and let this be a lesson served to any athlete, any prospect, any player coming out in future years' draft, never, ever bypass an opportunity to compete, because nothing is given, nothing is promised, and this year more than any year is a perfect example of that. So if you bypass the opportunity to compete at your combine in hopes of performing better at your pro day, well, hey, now we as NFL evaluators have incomplete information on you. So it's harder for us when we don't have that apples-to-apples comparison. It's harder for us to go to bat for you. And I will tell you this, we had a handful of guys, very few, but guys that did turn down the opportunity to come and compete at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. And I'll tell you what, those guys that did come out and compete, those 250-plus scouts in Pasadena that got a chance to see those guys up close and live and in person, they're going to be more willing to go to bat for players that they saw live and up against the cream of the crop competition. So it's really an interesting dynamic. I'm so intrigued by it this year. I think that, you're going to find out who really has the in-depth scouting departments, the real true regional scouts. The Cincinnati Bengals, who have the first pick, I think, in almost every round, they've notoriously been known to cut corners on their scouting staff. And they would bring in the coaches in the scouting evaluation process come January. And, a team like the Bengals that doesn't have as in-depth scouting a department as other teams, they might suffer. So we're going to find out, and we really won't know the answers till at least 5 years from now, but it'll be, again, a remarkable movie to watch whenever it does come out.
The guys that went to the combine that didn't do the drills, didn't run the 40, and were waiting to do it at their pro day, and their pro day was canceled, unless they had a significant amount of team interviews, their exposure to the NFL isn't any more than the guys that didn't go to the combine. Because even though they were there, if they didn't do anything, they really didn't. They really weren't there.
Yeah, but the one aspect that they did get to do was sit down and meet with those teams and do those 15-minute interviews. And I think the other important aspect was the medical.
The medical's big.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we didn't have the medical rechecks that we've always had in years past, but we had the initial medical. That alone is going to dictate where players are taken. I think that's where, any player who either had a significant injury throughout their career or had an injury this previous season that wasn't invited to the combine, again, just like not having measurables can impact the draft stock, not having medical reports, not being able to put a guy through a physical, not having your in-house doctors being able to poke and prod this player, how confident are you really going to be to invest a draft pick in a player where you just don't have all the information? And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. Okay, Rick, so we were talking about bus factor before, and you alluded to the fact that it's between the years. So from your many years of scouting, if you have two young men that are both equally blessed with a similar God-given ability, height, weight, speed, quicks, twitch, jumps, all that stuff, pretty similar, play the same position, both played at the same level, Power 5, whatever it was. What do you see as the one or two or three most important factors, mental factors, that make one player an all-pro and the other player perhaps he's out of the league in 2 years?
Craig, I think that's the most difficult question there is in evaluation, because if we had true answers to that, anybody that can answer that question would be a billionaire a billion times over, because every NFL team would want to know the secret to that formula. And I think you just don't know, right? Because here we are in 2020 where they have media coaches and the agents coach these guys up so much, almost to the point where, players can almost hurt themselves because they're just so programmed. They're just so prepped. They're almost too prepped. Their answers are robotic, and you can spend 15 minutes with a guy and say, man, that guy was really coached up so well. I don't even have a good read on what his true personality is, right? Because trying to gauge somebody from just 15 minutes is difficult to do. I will say it's hard to gauge the mental, because you got to put them through the Wonderlic. You got to put them through all these different kinds of tests that different teams utilize and kind of, form their opinion that way. I think, meeting with a player anytime you can, getting to know the family, I think is huge. Just knowing what kind of background they came from. Was it a troublesome childhood? Did they have a support system? All those things factor in. I think also, too, like, a lot of the busts at the next level, whether it's first round, second round, or guys that play themselves out of the league in a year or two that get drafted, I think a lot of it also comes down to coaching. The better coaches, I'm not sure why all the coaches don't implement this, but throughout the years, you see the coaches that have durability, the staying power, that have been here throughout the years, and the more successful football programs at the NFL level. One, it's continuity, and two, it's being able to adapt to your personnel. And instead of, taking a round peg and sitting in a square hole, you've got to be able to adapt. And Harbaugh in Baltimore is a perfect example. I mean, this guy was on the hot seat. They didn't make the playoffs. Joe Flacco was looking like a statue there. They make a move for Lamar Jackson. I'm pretty sure they still didn't know what they were getting, right? And they kind of built an offense around him. Deshaun Watson, same thing in Houston. They built the offense around him and adapted to the talent rather than making the talent adapt to the scheme. There's coaches out there that'll just say, hey, this is my system, this is my scheme. You've got to adapt and fit into it. And to me, that's where you get the busts. That's where you get the guys who don't pan out, because the great coaches, the great programs will say, hey, well, this is what the guy does well. And if it's a quarterback, let's build a system around his strengths, right? And, I think that's really the biggest difference in terms of bust factor. We can't weigh the mental. We can't weigh the heart. At the end of the day, we can just go based on what they tell us. But what we can weigh is the coaching. And I think, 9 times out of 10, a first-round quarterback isn't a bust because he's not talented. It's because the coaches he got linked with just wasn't a good fit.
Well, one of the things I've seen from the agent side is there's no doubt. There's a 50% failure rate in the first round. There's a 67% failure rate in the 7th round. And everywhere in between, it's pretty similar. Maybe the 4th round is the best one, because it seems like a lot of those 4th rounders end up being ballers because they were very productive in college, but they were missing something. They were an inch short. They wanted someone that had a little bit more twitchiness. But because he has a chip on his shoulder, and because he's hungry, because a hungry dog always gets the bone, not the fastest one. Fastest one gets there first. And then the meanest one shows up and takes it out of the mouth of the fastest one. Then the hungriest one comes and takes it from the meanest one, and the hungry one wins. The hungry dog always eats. And so what I've seen from the agent perspective is you got to find guys that want it really bad. And you see a lot of NFL guys that turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. They turn it on in their contract year, they get paid, and then they coast, and then they get cut. And so there's very few guys, and there are a few, that consistently perform every year, year in, year out. How many times have you ever played fantasy football, drafted a receiver, thought you got your guy, and then that year he caught 35 balls? Well, it's because he got paid because of what he did the year before, catching 90, and he went on cruise control a little bit, and when he had a little injury in week 7, he decided to take a couple weeks off to make sure he was right, where the year before he played through it.
Yeah, and, it goes back to the notorious B.I.G. All the old school hip-hop fans, Biggie Smalls, used to say, hey, I approach every song as if it's my first song. And I think that, in the NFL, once these guys get paid, they don't have that same hunger, that same desire as they do on that rookie contract where they're striving to feed their family. So you have to be cautious of that, and it goes back to the personality, DNA, and doing your due diligence, draft preparation. But I think what you said earlier is that, round 4 is that round where you see a lot of guys there on day 3 and round 4 get selected, and they outproduce or they outperform the players selected ahead of them at the same position because day 3 is where you can get guys that maybe don't check off all the boxes. So, Jatavis Brown for the Chargers, I think, went in the 4th round, and he just didn't check off the boxes in the height and the size department. But what a good player he was, and I know he struggled with injuries, but you can get guys that they might not check off all the boxes. They might not have the prototypical size. They might not have the ideal measurables, but hey, they can play football. And I think Sean Bradley from Temple is a guy that comes to mind. Like, hey, he's under 6 feet, lacks the prototypical size for a linebacker, but this guy is just an alpha dog. He's a competitor. He's just all over the field playing with his hair on fire, not to use a cliche, but probably a guy that's going to go on day 3, wind up being a 3-down backer, a starter at the next level, and he's going to outperform and outproduce so many guys taken ahead of him. And I think, again, going back to our conversation earlier in the show in terms of we're going to find out which NFL teams have those regional scouts that they can lean on and they can trust and identify the guys like the Sean Bradley, like the Nick Tiano, and guys like that. It's going to be a fun process this year. More than anything else, I think you're going to have, more surprises in terms of what the mainstream media is expecting. It's going to be more surprises and more people caught off guard than any given year before.
Well, I'm a little excited about that. I think it'll spice it up a little bit. It won't be so predictable. It'll be really cool when whoever the announcers are on day 3, they'll have their next 10 guys. These are guys that could be coming up. This team needs a D tackle. Here's the 10, and they pick somebody that is a D tackle and it's not in that 10. It's somebody else, and they'll be digging for highlight tapes and information and things like that. So I think that'll add some juice to the show.
To your point, they'll be scrambling to find that NFL draft Bible. Hey, what is the NFL draft Bible saying about this guy?
No doubt, man. You're the go-to source for when they don't know anything about a guy, especially a smaller school guy.
No doubt, and that's what we built our backbone on, and that's why we're still standing here almost 2 decades later. I mean, anybody can identify the top 100 guys, right? I mean, if you can't, then just get out of the business altogether. But if you can tell me who the top, the next 100 and the following 100 are after that, well, I think that's the big thing is like, hey, consistently identifying those day 2, day 3 talents. That's why, the fans appreciate NFL Draft Bible, even really identifying those undrafted free agents throughout the years that it's like, hey, this guy is not only is he going to make a 53-man roster, he's going to go on and be a productive contributor at the next level. And I think we've been able to, listen, everybody misses, right? And it's just like baseball. People don't realize this. If you bat 300 on your draft picks, well, you're doing pretty good. If you hit 50% of your draft picks, now you're outstanding. You're remarkable. Because I can tell you this, you go back and look at anybody's draft throughout the years, half of them are either out of the league or on another team within the, by the time that second contract, they're either gone or they're on another team. Very few players sign that second contract with their original team.
No doubt about it. And I just saw an article where, they've got a bust factor on Joe Burrow of 42%. And people might go, well, how could you take a player with the number 1 pick and there's a 40% chance he's going to bust? The reality of it is every player's like that. I know there's some players that are safer than others, but the NFL's hard. The gap between college and pro is crazy. And if you don't develop, and I think one of the things that hurts the early round guys, top 10 guys for sure, the expectations are so unrealistic that they could, if that same player would have been drafted in the 3rd round, he might end up going to the Hall of Fame and playing for 15 years. But he gets in the first, top 5, and they expect him to be the savior, new staff, new day. He's the face of the franchise. They got to plug and play him immediately, even though the guy they maybe have that played last year is better than him. Look at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's the perfect case. They want to move on from Andy Dalton. They may trade him. They may cut him. They may keep him around to tutor Burrow if that's in fact who they take. But I would venture to guess that Andy Dalton is a better NFL quarterback today than Joe Burrow is. Joe's going to be better down the road. He's got the potential. But if you just throw him in the fire, which they probably will, he might go 1-15. He might get sacked 65 times. Where is he going to be a year from now? Is he going to be in a better place? Or is he going to be like Dwayne Haskins right now, trying to, his head spinning, and everybody around the league's wondering if he's really a player or not?
Who, by the way, Joe Burrow lost the starting job at Ohio State and hence had to transfer to LSU. And you say, hey, well, Dwayne Haskins struggled mightily as a rookie. Joe Burrow couldn't beat him out. Mitchell Trubisky was kind of this one-year wonder coming out of North Carolina. He struggled mightily. And I know Joe had a huge resurrection this past season, and you still have to wonder, like, why did it take 4 years, Joe? It's got to be concerning. You take a look at one-year wonders, how they've panned out at the next level. Mark Sanchez is probably the best case study in terms of success, and I use that term loosely, success. So you take a look at one-year wonder quarterbacks coming out of the collegiate level and transitioning to the next level, there's far and few between that do succeed. So, yeah, for everything that Joe Burrow's accomplished, and arguably single-handedly the most impressive college football season of any quarterback in history, both from production, a statistical standpoint, and just eyeball, what he did was outstanding. But you still have to be concerned, like, hey, where was it the last 4 years, Joe? Yeah, he can bust. And let's be honest, there's going to be 4 or 5 quarterbacks selected here in the first round. 2 or 3 of them are going to bust.
No question about it. And then the other thing that happens is you've got the RG3s of the world that play the first year and play really, really well. And then come back their sophomore season, and it's not just a jinx. It's the beginning of the end of their starting career. And so I think for someone like Joe Burrow or any of the other guys drafted this year in the first round, if in fact they do get thrown in and they don't do well, don't be surprised. But if they do great, don't anoint them as the franchise quarterback and they're going to go to the Pro Bowl every year and they're going to go to Canton when it's over, because every D coordinator that's going to play that quarterback the next season is going to break him down, find out what he does well, what he doesn't do well, what position in the pocket does he struggle. They'll design their pass rush to move the quarterback to that position in the pocket that he doesn't feel comfortable and he's not as accurate. And so you got to do it 2 years in a row before you can even talk about the guy being the dude. So guys like Mahomes did it the first year he started, second season in the league, did it again, won a Super Bowl, played through injury. Mahomes is now that dude that you can say he's done it, and he's on his way.
No doubt.
But when a guy does it 1 year, you've got to withhold judgment until he's done it at least 2 years in a row.
No, it's a great point. I mean, these defensive coordinators, there's only 32, and these guys are sharp, they're smart, and all they do is break down film. And to your point, I think 75% maybe just going off, it would be a great case study. How many first-round quarterbacks actually suffer either production or statistically speaking a fallback in their sophomore year? I think we saw from Andrew Luck as a perfect example where, the NFL will catch up to you. Then you find out, hey, do I have a great quarterback like Patrick Mahomes who can continue to adapt and evolve and stay ahead of the curve? Or do I have a David Carr from the Houston Texans who's sacked 72 times his rookie season and just never recovers?
There's a lot of quarterbacks that get sacked a tremendous amount of times in their rookie season, and I really do think it kills their will to play. I really do.
That mental clock just speeds up, and when you don't have time to throw and you're thrown into the fire, your rookie season, you're under duress, you've got less than 3 seconds to get rid of the ball. It's a scary thing. The bullets are coming fast and furious, and if you're a 20-year-old quarterback and you get thrown into that fire and you struggle, well then, hey, your confidence could be shot. You might never, ever bounce. Look at Blake Bortles and all these guys that just were thrown into the fire, had no offensive line, no protection, and just, their body just got beaten up so much as a rookie mentally, that mental clock. Once it starts speeding up, you start making decisions faster than you're forced to want to make. That's when the turnovers happen and the bad ball occurs. And before you know it, hey, 5 years ago, we were debating Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, who's the better franchise quarterback, and here we are. They're both on their second contracts, and they'll both be playing with different teams.
Well, that's a great point, and I think that it's very difficult at the most difficult position in sports, quarterback. It's very difficult for a quarterback to string together a decade of high performance. So when you start looking at Drew Brees and obviously Tom Brady's done it twice, there's just, Roethlisberger's been pretty solid, but there's not that many guys. Jared Goff had a really good year 2 years ago, fell off last year. What's going to happen this year? That's the question. Jared Goff plays this year like he did last year, he might be looking at a pay cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much a huge difference can make, and same thing with the durability issues as well. I mean, Carson Wentz is a guy that, hey, had he stayed healthy or had he been healthy, we might be anointing this guy as one of the top quarterbacks in the league, because that year they made that Super Bowl run. Nick Foles got all the credit, the MVP, the playoff run, and all that good stuff. But Carson Wentz was the quarterback that got him there, and then he got hurt late in the season, and that's been a common denominator. It was something that I went up to him at the Combine because he had gotten injured the previous 2 years at North Dakota State running the ball, not knowing how to slide. And I told Carson, I said, man, you better learn how to slide with your legs first. He had gotten hurt 2 years in a row at North Dakota State because of these head-first slides. He comes into the NFL, his first 2 years, he gets hurt rolling the ball on quarterback sneak, and both times diving head first. He just couldn't get that through his head. So there's so many variables, so many X factors, and that's the beauty of the NFL draft process, right? It's beauty is truly in the eye of the beholder, and finding the guy that fits the right scheme and your system is ultimately, more important than identifying talent is identifying talent that fits your system or scheme.
Well, Belichick has won more games than anybody else, and that's what he seems to do better than anybody else. He makes a lot of mistakes in the draft. He makes a lot of mistakes in free agency. He signs guys hoping they're going to be a fit culturally and scheme fit, and they are, and they aren't. And the ones that aren't, he cuts, moves on, gets new players, and he's successful. And I think what happens to a lot of teams is they try to force the fit. They're embarrassed about their failures. I mean, if we had a crystal ball and we could tell today, a couple days before the draft, that a certain team is going to pick 8 guys and here's who they're going to be, and only 6 of them are going to make the active 53 from the jump. Only one of them is going to be a starter as a rookie. But 5 years from now, it's going to be an undrafted guy that's the best of the group. And a GM could say, I'm cool with that. We're going to do the best we can, and we hope we hit on every one, but we know we're not going to. They have to have enough self-awareness to go, this is not perfection. It's never going to be, because we're dealing with people. And we're also dealing with, as you talked about before, which is durability. You can't predict injury. Some people are more injury prone than others. Some people coming into this draft went to the NFL Combine and had a perfect grade on their medical. No issues, no fractures, no damage, no surgeries. They don't even have any question marks from the docs about any body parts. And next year in the NFL, they may get hurt.
No doubt. And, I still say durability is the best ability, but, to your point with the Patriots, Belichick gets a lot of credit for his success in the draft, but he also does strike out quite a bit. But, hey, again, if you're hitting on 50% of these guys, you're doing outstanding. And I think what most casual fans, right, probably don't realize is that anywhere between 25 to 33% of any given roster around the league is consisted of undrafted free agents. And it goes back to my point: is your bread and butter, where you earn your weight in salt, is not day one or day two. It's day three, and more so even the undrafted free agent process. But those rounds 5 through 7 are so unpredictable. And then being able to identify those priority free agents, because quite honestly, 1/3 of your roster is going to be making that rookie minimum or that veteran minimum. And you've got to be able to identify the undrafted free agents, because if you've got, for example, $30, $40 million invested in the quarterback position, well, hey, that's, 20, 25% of your salary cap. So now you've got to build the other 51 roster spots or so, figure out that other 75% of your roster, and undrafted free agents is where you can kind of win in this league. And I think if you see the Super Bowl winners, go look at how many undrafted free agents are on those Super Bowl winning teams, because those are the teams that have the scouting departments that can identify, again, players, not only talented players, that's part of it, but the second part of it is talented players who fit your scheme, identifying their skill sets and how it applies to what your system is and what they can do to kind of be successful in that scheme. So I think the undrafted free agent process, Craig, 250 guys are going to get drafted through the first 3 days. And then once the draft is over, those following 3 hours, 500 players are going to get signed. So to me, the undrafted free agent process is actually, this is just my personal opinion, more important than the actual NFL draft.
That's interesting. Well, there's no doubt that, if you look at certain teams, they've struck on free agents more than others. And you get cheap labor really for 3 years. And you get a hungry player that sets a great example for everybody else in the locker room, because they got a $2,000 signing bonus and they're working harder than everybody else. You need those guys on your team, no different than college. You've got a walk-on that, outworks everyone else, gets on the field, performs, and they give them a scholarship and they make a big deal about it. It's a reminder for the guys on scholarship that you just got outworked and outperformed by a guy that didn't even get a full ride. And it's a great example for the other guys that are still walk-ons and a target for them to strive for.
Yeah, and I think a perfect example of that trickling into the NFL this year is going to be the Carolina Panthers, right? Because Matt Rule is a guy that he plays positionless football, right? And he's looking to compete at every position, and nobody has a solidified starting spot, and it's his first year as a coach, and he's going to turn this roster upside down. If you look at Temple and Baylor, they weren't recruiting 4- and 5-star recruits. They were getting 2- and 3-star recruits and developing these players, but they were looking for traits specifically. The Rule, for example, speed. Give me the guy that's athletic, that's fast, that's quick. We'll coach him. We'll teach him up and get him coached up how to play better brand of football. And I think that's going to be, a perfect example of how that trickles into the NFL with a guy like Matt Rule, who, by the way, whether it's Temple or Baylor, not only does he know those players, but a lot of players that he recruited that he wasn't able to win, that he wasn't able to sign. I mean, he's sitting in the living rooms of these players, getting to know the mother and the father. And back to my point with the undrafted free agent process, when you have that personal relationship now, to your point, the signing bonus, it's beneficial for players to look at in a situation where they're going to be successful, as opposed to taking that bigger signing bonus as an undrafted free agent. And if Matt Rule can utilize those personal relationships to get those undrafted free agents to sign with Carolina as opposed to New England or some of his competitors, he's going to be a leg up on the rest of the league. And I think that's one thing to kind of keep an eye on here in that day 3 / undrafted free agent process, in terms of a slight, little bit of advantage that he has over the other teams.
I agree with that. And not only Matt, but his whole staff. I would say 80% of his staff is from college. Joe Brady's from LSU. A bunch of his guys are from Baylor. And all these guys have relationships with players. And then last year, Joe Brady had the game plan for all those defensive players in the SEC. So when it comes to the Panthers deciding between player A and B in the draft that's a defensive player, they need to get Brady's opinion because he played against them.
Oh, no doubt. And, Brady has NFL experience, too. A big reason why they signed Bridgewater, because he had Bridgewater there in New Orleans, knows the offense, and can hit the ground running. And, again, just without the OTAs, without the off-season workouts and everything else, and maybe a abbreviated training camp, it's like, hey, let me bring in this guy, Teddy Bridgewater, who's ran my offense and knows the system. And, yeah, we might not be able to get those practice reps on the field during this off-season here leading up to the season, but this guy knows the system. Kudos to Carolina for being out in front of that and finding guys that fit the system. We talked about durability and can Teddy Bridgewater stay on the field for a full 17-game schedule? That remains to be seen. But back to our point is identifying talent, identifying players that fit your system, know your scheme, and that's exactly what they're doing there in Carolina.
No, I expect them to do well. For those fans out there that will be watching the draft this weekend, give us one name, maybe two, that you think have no chance to get drafted because of where they're from, what the NFL teams think about them, level of competition, their physical traits, but their game film shows that they're going to be ballers. And these are the guys that might get big second contracts down the road because they deserve it, they've earned it, but they're not going to get drafted.
Yeah, putting me on the spot here, so a guy that comes to mind immediately is Rondell Carter from James Madison University. I think that, again, his pro day being canceled obviously hurts. He was not a combine invite. He was out at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl in Pasadena, where I thought he arguably was our best defensive lineman, including Roderick Washington from Texas Tech, who got the invitation, got called up to the Senior Bowl based on his performance there at the NFLPA Bowl. But Rondell Carter was a guy that play-for-play, one-on-ones, was just dominating. And, yeah, he played at James Madison University, but originally came to my neck of the woods here in New Jersey, started off at Rutgers, so he has the Power 5 pedigree. And I think he's a traditional, 43 hand-in-the-dirt defensive end guy that there's just not enough of these guys coming out in college, right? So, if you're looking for a 4-3 defensive end, Rondell Carter's your guy. I think he's going to play a very long, successful career at the next level. Another guy that comes to mind, I'll give you one, is Brian Herring from Georgia, the running back who was stuck behind DeAndre Swift this year, was stuck behind Nick Chubb last year. Brian Herring is a guy that just couldn't get on the field, not because he wasn't good, just because he got all these first-round picks playing ahead of him. And, he might go 6th or 7th round, but probably undrafted. And he's going to have a long career at the next level. He can do it all, run, pass, block. It's everything that you're looking for from a running back at the next level. And the mainstream media won't be on his tail too much, but NFL scouts know who he is. And I'm not sure that he gets drafted, but I am sure that he makes the team and has a successful NFL career.
Well, Rick, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show today. For those that were listening that might want to find you, where can they find you?
I appreciate that, Craig. NFLDraftBible.com. Of course, we're on the Twitterverse at NFL Draft Bible, and we appreciate all the love and support. I thank you for this time, Craig, for having me on the show and, hopefully distracting some people's minds here during the pandemic. I'm in New Jersey, so the coronavirus has hit us hard, and it's been a struggle for all of us, right? We're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. I like to say the United States of America, despite some of the things that are transpiring, we have to stay in it, be unified, get through this thing. And I think the NFL draft will be a much-needed mind distraction, if anything else. And, again, I think, even my wife is looking forward to it, Craig, and she hates football. So there you go.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.
This year, millions will be diagnosed with low energy. But Planet Fitness has the cure. Boost your energy with tons of equipment in our clean and spacious clubs for $1 down and $10 a month.
Join the judgment-free zone today. Deal extended to Wednesday, April 12th.
See Home Club for details.
Leftovers. Or the DMV.
Number 97.
Or house cleaning. Or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.